The bitter taste hit my tongue before I could swallow, followed by a burning sensation that made my throat constrict. I dropped the coffee cup, watching the dark liquid splash across my kitchen floor as my stomach churned violently. This was the fourth time this week that my usual vanilla latte from Roasted Dreams Café had tasted off, and I was starting to suspect it wasn't an accident. What I discovered on those security cameras would change everything I thought I knew about betrayal, revenge, and what it really means to fight back. But the real shock wasn't what Brooke Hamilton was putting in my drinks. It was what happened when I finally decided to stop being a victim. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I should have seen the warning signs when Tyler and I broke up 6 months ago. The way he immediately started posting photos with Brooke, a barista from my regular coffee spot, felt calculated rather than coincidental. Tyler Brooks had always been the type to line up his next relationship before ending his current one, but this felt different. This felt personal. Our 3-year relationship had ended over what I thought was a simple disagreement about our future. Tyler wanted me to give up my freelance graphic design work and get a real job with benefits and stability. I wanted to pursue my dream of opening my own creative agency. The fights escalated until he delivered his ultimatum during a tense dinner at our favorite restaurant. "You need to choose, Chloe. Either you get serious about your career like an adult, or we're done," he had said, cutting into his steak with unnecessary force. I can't build a life with someone who treats work like a hobby. I chose my dreams. He chose Brooke Hamilton, who apparently represented everything I wasn't. Stable. Practical. Content with serving coffee instead of chasing what Tyler called unrealistic fantasies. The first month after our breakup, I avoided Roasted Dreams Café entirely. The thought of running into Tyler and his new girlfriend while ordering my morning coffee felt too pathetic to endure. But the cafe was perfectly located between my apartment in the Pearl District and my main client's office downtown. After a month of detours to inferior coffee shops, I decided I was being ridiculous. Portland had dozens of coffee shops, but none made a vanilla latte quite like Roasted Dreams. My first encounter with Brooke behind the counter was awkward but manageable. She was shorter than me, with perfectly straightened blonde hair and the kind of effortless makeup that suggested she woke up early to look naturally beautiful. Her smile was professional as she took my order, giving no indication she knew who I was. "Medium vanilla latte with oat milk," I said, maintaining eye contact to show I wasn't intimidated. "Coming right up," she replied sweetly, her voice carrying a slight southern accent that I hadn't noticed before. "Name for the order?" "Chloe." Something flickered across her face at my name, but she simply wrote it on the cup and passed it to her coworker at the espresso machine. The coffee tasted perfect that day, and I began to think that maybe this arrangement could work. We were both adults. We could coexist in a coffee shop. The problem started 3 weeks later. It began subtly. My usual vanilla latte would taste slightly off, as if they'd used regular milk instead of oat milk, or forgotten the vanilla entirely. When I mentioned it politely, Brooke would apologize profusely and offer to remake the drink, but the replacement often had the same issues. I started to wonder if she was new to coffee making, despite having worked there when Tyler and I were still together. Then the drinks got worse. One morning, my latte tasted overwhelmingly salty, as if someone had mistaken salt for sugar. Another day, it had a chemical aftertaste that lingered for hours. I began to suspect deliberate sabotage but felt foolish voicing such paranoid thoughts. Who would risk their job to mess with an ex-boyfriend's former girlfriend's coffee order? The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in late October. I had an important presentation with Victoria Stone, the CEO of Portland's most successful digital marketing firm. Landing this contract could transform my freelance business into something substantial. I needed caffeine and confidence in equal measure. Brooke smiled brightly as I approached the counter, her demeanor friendlier than usual. "The usual, Chloe? Medium vanilla latte with oat milk?" "Please," I confirmed, noting how she seemed to emphasize my name with particular satisfaction. The drink looked perfect when she handed it to me, the foam art even more elaborate than usual. I took a grateful sip as I walked toward my car, then immediately regretted it. The taste was indescribably wrong, bitter and sharp with an underlying flavor that made my stomach turn. By the time I reached my car, I was nauseous and dizzy. I spent the next 2 hours in my apartment bathroom, violently sick and unable to keep anything down. My presentation with Victoria Stone had to be postponed, and I lost the contract to a competitor who was available that afternoon. 3 months of work and relationship building evaporated because I couldn't stop vomiting long enough to present my proposal. That night, as I lay weak and dehydrated on my couch, my best friend Zoe Chin came over with soup and suspicion. "This is the 5th time you've gotten sick after drinking coffee from that place," she pointed out, settling cross-legged on my coffee table to face me directly. "Either they have the worst food safety standards in Portland, or something else is going on." "You think Brooke is deliberately poisoning my coffee?" I asked, though saying it aloud made the possibility seem less paranoid and more plausible. "I think Tyler's new girlfriend works at your regular coffee shop. You've been getting mysteriously sick from drinks she makes, and you just lost a major contract because of it," Zoe replied matter-of-factly. "What do you think?" I wanted to dismiss her theory as overthinking, but the pattern was undeniable. The problems only occurred when Brooke personally made my drinks. On days when other baristas served me, the coffee was perfect. The timing of my worst reaction, right before my most important presentation, seemed too coincidental to ignore. "What am I supposed to do?" I asked, feeling helpless and frustrated. Accuse her of poisoning me? Demand they fire her based on my suspicious? Document everything, Zoe suggested immediately. If she's doing this deliberately, she'll keep doing it. Get evidence. The idea of installing surveillance seemed extreme, but losing the Victoria Stone contract had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. That presentation represented months of preparation and networking. It could have been the foundation for everything I'd been working toward. If Brooke Hamilton was sabotaging my health and my career out of some twisted loyalty to Tyler, I needed proof. The next morning, I visited an electronics store and purchased a small, discreet camera designed for home security. The salesperson, a young man with impressive technical knowledge, helped me select one that could connect to my phone and record continuously for several hours. "Planning to catch package thieves?" he asked as he rang up my purchase. "Something like that," I replied, not wanting to explain the real situation. Setting up the camera in Roasted Dreams Café required careful planning. The coffee shop's layout worked in my favor with several high tables near the counter where customers could sit with laptops. I positioned myself at a table with a clear view of the drink preparation area, angled my phone to look like I was video calling while actually recording, and waited for Brooke's shift to begin. She arrived 20 minutes into my surveillance, greeting her coworkers with the same bright smile she gave customers. I watched her normal routine for an hour, observing how she prepared drinks for other customers. Everything appeared completely professional and standard. She followed proper procedures, measured ingredients carefully, and maintained the cleanliness standards I'd expect from any coffee shop. When a lull in customers presented the perfect opportunity, I approached the counter and ordered my usual drink. Brooke's smile seemed particularly warm as she wrote my name on the cup. "How's your morning going, Chloe?" she asked with seemingly genuine interest. "Busy," I replied, keeping my voice neutral while my phone continued recording from the table behind me. "Well, hopefully this will help," she said, beginning to prepare my latte with her usual efficiency. I watched her every movement through my peripheral vision while pretending to check my phone. She steamed the oat milk perfectly, pulled the espresso shots with proper timing, and added the vanilla syrup in the correct proportion. Everything looked completely normal until she reached for something behind the espresso machine. The angle made it difficult to see clearly, but her movement was quick and deliberate, adding something to my cup before topping it with the steamed milk. The entire action took less than 3 seconds, so smoothly executed that anyone not specifically watching would have missed it completely. "There you go," she said cheerfully, handing me the cup with its perfect foam art. "Have an amazing day." I thanked her and returned to my table, my heart racing as I ended the recording. The evidence was captured, but I needed to be absolutely certain before taking any action. I carried the coffee outside without drinking it and poured the entire contents into a glass container I'd brought for this purpose. The liquid looked normal, smelled like vanilla and coffee, but I wasn't taking any chances with my health. Instead, I drove to a laboratory testing facility that Zoe had researched for me. They offered discreet food testing services, no questions asked, results available within 48 hours. "We're testing for anything that shouldn't be in coffee," I explained to the technician as I handed over the sample. "Contamination, adulterants, foreign substances," she confirmed, labeling the container with a reference number. "We'll call you with results." The next 2 days passed in anxious anticipation. I avoided Roasted Dreams Café entirely, working from home and getting my caffeine fix from a shop across town. Zoe checked on me constantly, as invested in solving this mystery as I was. The laboratory called on Thursday afternoon with results that confirmed my worst suspicions and opened up questions I hadn't considered. "Ms. Rivera, we found several concerning substances in your coffee sample," the technician explained in a professional but sympathetic tone. "Sodium chloride in concentrations far beyond what would occur naturally, along with traces of ipecac syrup." Ipecac syrup? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I repeated, unfamiliar with the term. "It's used to induce vomiting," she clarified. "The combination would cause nausea, stomach upset, and potentially more severe reactions depending on the dosage and individual sensitivity." My suspicions were confirmed, but the reality felt worse than I'd imagined. Brooke hadn't just been making my coffee taste bad out of petty rivalry. She'd been deliberately making me sick with substances that could cause real harm. The timing of my worst reaction, right before the Victoria Stone presentation, now seemed like calculated sabotage rather than coincidence. Armed with laboratory evidence and video documentation, I had choices to make. The obvious option was involving the police, but pressing charges would require explaining the entire situation publicly. Tyler and Brooke would know I'd been investigating them, and the drama could affect my professional reputation in Portland's tight-knit creative community. The alternative was handling this privately, but that approach carried its own risks. If I confronted Brooke directly, she could deny everything and potentially escalate her behavior. If I involved the coffee shop management without legal backing, it would become a he-said-she-said situation that might not result in any consequences for her actions. Zoe advocated for the nuclear option when I showed her the test results and camera footage. "She poisoned you, Chloe. Multiple times. You could have been seriously hurt," she said, pacing around my living room with barely contained anger. "This isn't just about coffee or petty jealousy. This is assault." I knew she was right, but something held me back from immediate action. Maybe it was the lingering self-doubt that Tyler had cultivated during our relationship, the voice that questioned whether I was overreacting or being dramatic. Maybe it was fear of the attention that criminal charges would bring. Or maybe I wanted something more than just punishment for Brooke. I wanted to understand why someone would go to such lengths to hurt a stranger. That understanding came sooner than expected. On Friday evening, as I sat in my apartment reviewing the evidence and planning my next move, Tyler texted me for the first time since our breakup. The message was brief but loaded with implications that I was only beginning to grasp. "We need to talk. Can you meet me at Peninsula Park tomorrow at 2 p.m? It's important." I stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding. Tyler's sudden desire to communicate, combined with Brooke's escalating attacks on my health, suggested a connection I hadn't fully considered. Maybe the coffee shop sabotage wasn't just his new girlfriend acting independently. Maybe this had been coordinated from the beginning. "Fine," I texted back. "But this better be worth my time." His response came immediately. "It will be. And Chloe? Come alone. T." The ominous tone of his final message sent a chill through me, but also sparked something I hadn't felt in months. Not fear, but determination. For too long, I'd allowed other people to control my narrative, to make me feel small and powerless. Tyler had dismissed my dreams and made me question my worth. Brooke had poisoned me and potentially sabotaged my career. But I had evidence now. I had proof. And I was done being a victim. As I prepared for what I suspected would be a confrontational conversation with my ex-boyfriend, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to Peninsula Park to be manipulated or intimidated. I was going there to end this, once and for all, on my terms. The real question wasn't whether Tyler and Brooke had conspired against me. The real question was what I was going to do about it, and how far I was willing to go to protect myself and reclaim my power. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Peninsula Park stretched out under the overcast Portland sky, its rose gardens dormant in the late October chill. I arrived 15 minutes early, positioning myself on a bench with clear sight lines to all entrances. The laboratory results and camera footage were saved to my phone, uploaded to cloud storage, and copies sent to Zoe with instructions to contact authorities if I didn't check in by 5 p.m. Tyler appeared exactly on time, walking across the grass with the confident stride I'd once found attractive. He looked different than during our relationship, more polished but somehow diminished. His hair was perfectly styled, his jacket expensive, but there was something hollow in his expression that hadn't been there before. "Thanks for coming," he said, settling onto the opposite end of the bench without attempting his usual charm offensive. "Get to the point, Tyler. What's so important that you needed to drag me out here?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring across the park as if gathering courage. When he finally spoke, his voice carried none of its typical arrogance. "Brooke told me what she's been doing." The admission hung between us like a confession, confirming what I'd suspected but hoped wasn't true. My ex-boyfriend had known about the poisoning. Whether he'd encouraged it or simply allowed it to continue, he'd been complicit in endangering my health. "And?" I prompted, keeping my voice steady despite the anger building in my chest. "I didn't ask her to do it," he continued quickly. "But I didn't stop her either, and that makes me responsible." "What exactly has she been doing, Tyler? I want to hear you say it." He shifted uncomfortably, finally meeting my eyes. "Putting things in your coffee. Salt, that syrup stuff that makes you sick. She said she wanted to teach you a lesson about staying away from places where you weren't wanted." "Places where I wasn't wanted," I repeated slowly. "You mean the coffee shop I'd been going to for 2 years before I even met you?" "I know how it sounds," he said defensively. "But you have to understand, Brooke feels threatened by you. She thinks you're trying to interfere with our relationship. By ordering coffee? By existing in the same city where you happen to live? By refusing to disappear," he snapped, finally showing the Tyler I remembered from our worst fights. "Do you know what it's like having my girlfriend constantly worried about running into my ex? Having to hear about how successful and independent you think you are?" The mask was slipping, revealing the real reason behind this meeting. This wasn't an apology or an attempt at reconciliation. This was Tyler trying to convince me to make his current relationship easier by minimizing my presence in Portland's creative community. "So you decided I needed to be taught a lesson," I said, my voice getting quieter as my resolve hardened. "You let your girlfriend poison my coffee because my existence inconveniences you." "Nobody said anything about poisoning," he protested, though his tone suggested he knew how weak the distinction sounded. "Ipecac syrup, Tyler. She's been putting ipecac syrup in my drinks. That's not a prank or a lesson. That's assault." His face went pale at my use of the clinical term, confirming that he hadn't understood the severity of what Brooke had been doing. Maybe he'd imagined harmless sabotage, coffee that tasted bad but caused no real harm. The reality was apparently more serious than he'd realized. "You had it tested?" he asked quietly. "I had it tested. I have video evidence. I have documentation of every incident, including the day I got so sick I lost the Victoria Stone contract." I watched his expression change as he processed the implications. "That presentation could have changed everything for my business, Tyler. Your girlfriend didn't just make me sick. She sabotaged my career. Chloe, I swear I had no idea it was that serious. Brooke made it sound like harmless pranks, like she was just making your coffee taste bad. And you thought that was acceptable? You thought I deserved to be harassed because I had the audacity to continue living my life after you dumped me?" The silence stretched between us as Tyler struggled to find words that might justify the unjustifiable. I studied his face, looking for signs of the man I'd once loved, but but finding only someone who'd become smaller and more petty than I'd remembered. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. "I want you to understand that this ends now. Today. I want Brooke to stop working at Roasted Dreams, or I go to the police with everything I have. You can't get her fired. She needs that job." Then she should have thought about that before she decided to poison customers. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the conversation and Tyler's inability to grasp the seriousness of what had happened. "This isn't a negotiation. This is me telling you what's going to happen. And if I refuse? If we don't just roll over because you're making threats?" I turned back to face him fully, feeling something shift inside me that had been building since the day I'd driven away from our shared life. The woman who'd begged him to support her dreams, who'd questioned her worth when he chose someone else, was gone. In her place stood someone who'd learned to value herself enough to fight back. Then you'll find out what happens when someone with evidence of criminal behavior decides to stop being polite about it. Tyler's confident facade cracked completely at my words. For the first time in our entire relationship, I was the one with power, and we both knew it. "I'll talk to her," he said quickly. "I'll make sure this stops." "You have 48 hours, I replied, already walking away. "After that, I make this everyone's problem, not just yours." The confrontation with Tyler should have felt like a victory, but driving home through Portland's afternoon traffic, I felt only a hollow satisfaction. Yes, I'd stood up for myself and demanded consequences for the people who'd hurt me. But the encounter had also crystallized something I'd been trying to ignore for months. I was tired of fighting. Tired of having to defend my right to exist in spaces that predated my relationship with Tyler. Tired of feeling like my life was defined by other people's actions and reactions. Even if Brooke quit her job and Tyler disappeared from my daily reality, I'd still be the woman who'd had to install cameras and collect evidence just to drink coffee safely. Portland had become a city of landmines, places, and people connected to memories I no longer wanted to carry. Every corner of the Pearl District held reminders of the life I'd built with Tyler. Every coffee shop was a potential encounter with someone from our shared social circle who might want to weigh in on our breakup. Every networking event carried the risk of running into people who knew me primarily as Tyler's ex-girlfriend rather than as an independent creative professional. Sitting in my apartment that evening, surrounded by the evidence of my investigation and the weight of my ultimatum, I made a decision that surprised even me. I was going to leave Portland. Not because Tyler and Brooke had driven me away, but because I was ready to build something entirely my own, somewhere that held no history or expectations. Zoe arrived an hour after I called her, armed with wine and the expectation of celebrating my confrontation with Tyler. Instead, she found me researching cities and job markets on my laptop. "What's all this?" she asked, settling beside me on the couch and scanning the tabs open on my browser. "I'm thinking about relocating," I said simply. "Starting fresh somewhere new." "Because of what happened today?" "Chloe, you won. You stood up to them and they backed down. Did I win? Or did I just exhaust myself fighting a battle that never should have been necessary?" Zoe was quiet for a moment, studying my face with the careful attention she'd perfected during years of friendship. "This isn't about them anymore, is it? This is about you wanting something different." I've spent 6 months defining myself in relation to Tyler and his choices. Even today, standing up to him, I was still letting him set the terms of my life. I'm tired of reacting. I want to create. "Where are you thinking?" I gestured to my laptop screen, which displayed information about Austin's growing creative economy. Somewhere with opportunities for someone starting their own agency. Somewhere I can be Chloe Rivera the entrepreneur, not Chloe Rivera who got dumped and stalked by her ex's new girlfriend. "Austin's 1,200 miles away," Zoe pointed out, though her tone was thoughtful rather than discouraging. "Exactly. Far enough that I'll have to build something completely new, but close enough that it doesn't feel like running away to another country." We spent the next hour researching Austin's creative landscape, cost of living, and potential opportunities. By the end of the evening, what had started as an impulsive reaction to the day's events had transformed into a legitimate plan with timelines and practical considerations. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Before I could second-guess myself, I opened my laptop and began drafting emails to every contact in my professional network. Instead of hiding what had happened or minimizing my reasons for leaving, I framed my relocation as a strategic business decision. I'm expanding my creative services to the Austin market, I wrote to potential clients and collaborators. Portland has been an incredible launching pad for my freelance career, but I'm ready to scale up in a city that's becoming a major hub for innovative businesses. The response was immediate and overwhelmingly positive. 3 former clients had connections in Austin and offered introductions. 2 colleagues knew of agencies that were hiring or looking for freelance partners. 1 contact had recently moved to Austin herself and invited me to visit for a networking week before making any final decisions. By Wednesday, I'd booked a flight to Austin for the following week and started researching neighborhoods and temporary housing options. The speed of my decision-making felt reckless but also exhilarating. For the first time since my breakup with Tyler, I was moving towards something I wanted rather than away from something that hurt. Thursday afternoon brought the deadline I'd given Tyler, along with confirmation that Brooke Hamilton had submitted her resignation from Roasted Dreams Café. The news should have felt like vindication, but instead it felt like closing a chapter one was already ready to finish. Friday morning, I returned to Roasted Dreams for the first time since installing my hidden camera. The atmosphere felt different without Brooke behind the counter, lighter somehow. The barista who made my vanilla latte was someone I'd seen during previous visits, a young man with intricate tattoos who took pride in his foam art. Medium vanilla latte with oat milk, I ordered, noting how normal the transaction felt without undercurrents of hostility or hidden agendas. Coming right up. Name for the order? Chloe. He wrote my name on the cup without recognition or significance, just another customer in his morning routine. When he handed me the finished drink, it tasted exactly as it should, vanilla and coffee and steamed milk in perfect harmony. Standing outside Roasted Dreams with my perfectly crafted latte, I realized this was probably the last time I'd visit this place. Not because I'd been driven away, but because I was choosing to go somewhere else. The distinction felt important, a reclamation of agency that had been missing from too many of my recent decisions. Austin was calling, and I was ready to answer. The Austin heat hit me like a wall when I stepped off the plane in early November, a stark contrast to Portland's perpetual drizzle. Even the air felt different here, charged with possibility and the energy of a city constantly reinventing itself. I'd booked a week-long scouting trip to explore neighborhoods, meet potential contacts, and determine if this move was inspired decision-making or elaborate self-sabotage. My first stop was a coffee meeting with Miranda Chen, the colleague who'd relocated to Austin 6 months earlier. We met at Radio Coffee on Barton Springs Road, a bustling spot that immediately felt more vibrant than anywhere I'd frequented in Portland. The conversation flowed easily as Miranda shared her experience transitioning from Portland's creative scene to Austin's exploding tech and startup culture. The opportunities here are incredible, she explained, gesturing toward the diverse crowd of laptop-wielding entrepreneurs around us. But it's also more competitive. Everyone's trying to make it big, which means you have to be willing to hustle harder than you've ever hustled before. I'm ready for that, I replied, though part of me wondered if I truly understood what I was committing to. Good, because I might have something perfect for you. Miranda pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. There's a startup called Momentum Digital that's looking for someone to lead their creative strategy. They're still small, maybe 15 people, but they're growing fast and their CEO has big ambitions. The opportunity sounded intriguing, exactly the kind of challenge I'd been craving. Miranda arranged an informal introduction for later that week, cautioning me that the company's founder, Ethan Walsh, was known for being demanding but also for recognizing and rewarding exceptional talent. Over the next 3 days, I explored Austin with the methodical approach I'd once applied to market research. I visited South by Southwest venues to understand the city's creative infrastructure, toured co-working spaces in East Austin where many freelancers and small agencies operated, and spent hours in different neighborhoods getting a feel for where I might want to live. The contrast with Portland was striking. Where Portland felt established and somewhat insular, Austin buzzed with newcomers and transplants all trying to build something from scratch. The creative community was larger but less interconnected, which meant more opportunities but also less built-in support. It was exactly the kind of environment where someone could disappear into anonymity or emerge as a major player, depending on their ambition and execution. Wednesday afternoon, I met Ethan Walsh at Momentum Digital's offices in a converted warehouse in East Austin. The space perfectly embodied the startup aesthetic, with exposed brick walls, standing desks, and a ping-pong table that looked actually used rather than decorative. Employees worked intently at their stations, but the atmosphere felt energetic rather than stressed. Ethan himself was not what I'd expected. Miranda had described him as demanding, which I'd interpreted as potentially arrogant or difficult. Instead, I found someone who radiated focused intensity but seemed genuinely interested in collaborative problem-solving. He was probably a few years older than me, with the kind of effortless confidence that suggested experience rather than posturing. "Miranda says you're considering relocating from Portland," he said as we settled into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the warehouse floor. "That's either very brave or very reckless, depending on your circumstances." "Probably a little of both," I admitted, appreciating his directness. "I've been freelancing successfully in Portland, but I'm ready for something bigger. More challenging. Tell me about the most difficult project you've managed and how you handled it when everything went wrong." The question caught me off guard with its specificity. Rather than asking about my strengths or career goals, he wanted to understand how I performed under pressure. I found myself describing the Victoria Stone presentation that had been derailed by my poisoning incident, though I framed it as a sudden illness that had forced me to adapt quickly. The client was expecting a traditional marketing approach, I explained, but during my recovery time, I realized their real problem wasn't visibility. It was authenticity. Their brand felt corporate and disconnected from their values. So when I rescheduled, I completely restructured my proposal to address brand alignment instead of just marketing tactics. Did they accept the revised approach? No, I admitted. They went with a more conventional agency. But 6 months later, they came back asking if I was still available because their original choice hadn't delivered the results they needed. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "So you were willing to risk losing a client to propose what you believed they actually needed, not just what they thought they wanted." "Exactly. Though I learned to present those kinds of insights more diplomatically in the future." We spent the next hour discussing Momentum Digital's client base, growth projections, and the role they were looking to fill. The position wasn't just about creative strategy, it involved building systems for client management, developing processes for scaling creative services, and potentially growing into a leadership role as the company expanded. "This isn't a traditional employee situation," Ethan clarified. "We're looking for someone who wants to build something significant, not just execute someone else's vision." The compensation reflects that it's part salary, part equity, with performance bonuses tied to company growth. The offer was both more and less than I'd expected. The base salary was lower than what I could command as an established freelancer, but the equity component could be substantial if Momentum Digital achieved its growth targets. More importantly, the role offered something I couldn't create as a solo freelancer: the resources and support to tackle larger, more complex projects. "I'll need to think about it," I said, though my instinct was already leaning toward yes. "Take your time. But if you're serious about relocating, I'd recommend visiting during South by Southwest next year. You'll get a better sense of what Austin's creative scene is really like when it's operating at full capacity." The suggestion planted an idea that would later prove crucial. South by Southwest was still months away, but the festival represented everything Austin stood for: creative collision, unexpected opportunities, and the chance for unknowns to become industry leaders practically overnight. Thursday brought apartment hunting with a local realtor who specialized in helping creative professionals find housing. We toured everything from converted lofts in East Austin to modern apartments downtown, each with different advantages and price points. The cost of living was significantly lower than Portland, which meant I could afford better space or save more money for business investments. "What's your timeline?" the realtor asked as we finished viewing a particularly appealing one-bedroom with exposed beam ceilings and walking distance to several creative co-working spaces. "Potentially January, depending on some other factors falling into place. I'd recommend deciding soon if you're serious. Austin's growing fast, and good spaces in desirable neighborhoods don't stay available long." Friday morning, I had coffee with 3 other Portland transplants Miranda had connected me with. Each had different advice about making the transition successfully, but all emphasize the importance of networking aggressively and being willing to take risks that might not pay off immediately. Portland's creative scene is wonderful, but it can be a little insular, explained James, a graphic designer who'd moved to Austin the previous year. Here, you'll meet people from everywhere trying everything. The opportunities are bigger, but so is the competition. The key is finding your niche quickly, added Sarah, who'd started a successful social media consultancy after relocating. Austin rewards specialists who can execute at a high level, not generalists who do everything adequately. Their insights reinforced what I'd been sensing throughout the week. Austin would demand the best version of myself, but it would also provide platforms for showcasing those capabilities that simply didn't exist in smaller markets. My return flight to Portland on Saturday evening felt like traveling backward in time. The gray skies and familiar landmarks that had once felt comforting now seemed constraining. I'd spent 5 days imagining a different version of my life, and the contrast made my current situation feel smaller than I'd realized. Zoe picked me up at the airport with her usual enthusiasm and curiosity. So, are you moving to Texas or coming to your senses? I'm moving to Texas, I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Seriously? Just like that? Just like that. Ethan offered me a position that's exactly what I've been looking for, and everything else about the city feels right. I'm giving notice on my apartment and planning to relocate by January. The conversation continued through dinner and late into the evening as I described everything I'd experienced during the week. Zoe listened with the careful attention of someone trying to understand a major decision by their closest friend, occasionally asking questions that forced me to examine my motivations more deeply. This isn't about Tyler and Brooke, right? She asked directly. You're not running away disguised as running towards something? 6 months ago, it might have been, I admitted. But this week, I barely thought about them. I was too busy imagining what I could build if I had access to better resources and bigger opportunities. And you're sure about this Ethan person? You just met him, and you're basically restructuring your entire life around a job offer. I'm restructuring my life around an opportunity. The job offer is just the vehicle. Over the following weeks, I threw myself into preparation with an intensity that surprised even me. I researched Austin's creative community extensively, identifying key players, important events, and potential collaboration opportunities. I reached out to every contact I'd made during my visit, nurturing relationships that might prove valuable once I relocated. The logistics of moving cross-country were more complex than I'd anticipated. Beyond the obvious challenges of finding movers and transferring utilities, I had to consider how to maintain my existing Portland client base during the transition while building new relationships in Austin. I decided to be transparent with my current clients about my relocation plans, positioning it as an expansion of my services rather than an abandonment of our working relationships. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with several clients expressing interest in potentially expanding their own operations to Texas markets. You're taking a big risk, acknowledged David, the CEO of a Portland-based tech startup I'd been working with for 8 months. But you're also positioning yourself to grow faster than you could hear. We'll definitely want to maintain our working relationship, and who knows? Maybe we'll need someone with Austin connections down the road. December became a whirlwind of preparation, planning, and gradual disconnection from my Portland life. I sold furniture that wouldn't survive the move, researched everything from Austin's best coffee shops to its networking events, and began the emotional process of saying goodbye to the city that had been home for my entire adult life. The hardest conversation was with Zoe, who'd been my anchor through every major decision and crisis of the past 5 years. We both knew that maintaining a close friendship across such distance would require intentional effort, and that our dynamic would inevitably change. I'm proud of you, she said during our final dinner together at our favorite Vietnamese restaurant. 6 months ago, you were devastated by Tyler's betrayal and questioning everything about yourself. Now you're taking control of your future in a way that's completely authentic to who you are. I couldn't have gotten here without you, I replied truthfully. You helped me see that I was worth fighting for, even when I couldn't see it myself. Promise me you'll stay in touch. Real contact, not just social media updates. Promise. And promise me you'll visit once I get settled. New Year's Eve found me in my empty Portland apartment, surrounded by packed boxes and cleaning supplies. I'd arranged for movers to collect everything the following week, after which I'd drive to Austin with nothing but my car, my laptop, and a carefully curated selection of belongings that represented who I wanted to become rather than who I'd been. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. 1 year ago, I'd been planning a future with Tyler, trying to convince him that my creative ambitions were worthy of support and investment. Now I was preparing to relocate to a city where those same ambitions would be assets rather than liabilities, working for someone who valued entrepreneurial thinking over conventional security. As midnight approached and Portland celebrated the arrival of January, I found myself feeling not nostalgic but anticipatory. The past year had been painful but transformative, stripping away illusions about other people while revealing strength I hadn't known I possessed. Everything that had happened with Tyler and Brooke, from the initial betrayal through the coffee shop sabotage to my eventual confrontation and victory, had been necessary steps toward this moment. I was ready for Austin. More importantly, I was ready for the version of myself that Austin would demand and nurture. The woman who'd been dismissed as impractical and unrealistic was about to prove just how powerful practical dreamers could become when they found the right environment to flourish. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Welcome to the team. Looking forward to seeing what we build together." I smiled as I typed back my response. Ready to get started. Outside, Portland celebrated another year of familiar rhythms and established patterns. Inside, I was already living in tomorrow. Austin in January felt like stepping into a city-sized reset button. The mild winter weather, the energy of post-holiday goal setting, and the constant influx of newcomers all contributed to an atmosphere where reinvention felt not just possible but inevitable. I arrived at Momentum Digital's offices on my first official day with the nervous excitement of someone about to discover whether they'd made a brilliant decision or a spectacular mistake. Ethan had assigned me a workspace in the open floor plan, strategically positioned where I could observe the entire operation while remaining accessible to team members who might need creative guidance. The setup felt intentional, designed to immerse me in the company culture rather than isolate me in a traditional office hierarchy. "Your first project is us," Ethan explained during my initial briefing. "We've been so focused on serving clients that we've neglected our own brand development. I need you to figure out what Momentum Digital actually stands for and how we communicate that to potential clients and employees." The assignment was both exciting and daunting. Brand development for a growing company required understanding not just their current identity but their aspirations for growth. It meant interviewing every team member, analyzing their client work, and identifying patterns that might reveal their authentic voice and values. I spent my first week conducting informal conversations with everyone from junior developers to senior account managers. Each person had joined Momentum Digital for different reasons, but common themes emerged: intellectual challenge, collaborative problem solving, and the opportunity to work with clients who valued innovation over convention. "We're not trying to be the biggest agency in Austin," explained Maria, a user experience designer who'd been with the company for 18 months. "We want to be the agency that takes on interesting problems and solves them in ways nobody else would think of. The clients who find us are usually frustrated with traditional approaches," added Kevin, a developer whose background spanned everything from e-commerce platforms to augmented reality applications. "They come to us when they need someone to think differently about their challenges." The interviews revealed a company culture that prized creative problem-solving and authentic collaboration, but struggled to articulate these values in their external communications. Their website looked professional but generic, their case studies focused on technical achievements rather than creative insights, and their social media presence was practically non-existent. My second week involved analyzing their most successful client relationships to identify what made those partnerships work. I reviewed project documentation, client feedback, and financial data to understand which types of engagements produced the best results for both parties. The pattern that emerged was illuminating. Momentum Digital's most satisfied clients were companies that came to them with strategic challenges rather than tactical requests. Instead of asking for a website or an app, these clients wanted to understand how digital tools could transform their business operations or customer relationships. "You're positioning yourselves as vendors when you should be positioning yourselves as strategic partners," I told Ethan during my preliminary findings presentation. "Your best clients don't hire you to execute their ideas. They hire you to help them figure out what their ideas should be in the first place. Ethan nodded thoughtfully as he reviewed my research. That makes sense. Those are definitely our most enjoyable projects and our most profitable ones. How do we attract more clients like that? By changing how you talk about your work. Instead of showcasing technical capabilities, we showcase thinking processes. Instead of listing services, we tell stories about transformations. The brand overhaul I proposed was comprehensive but focused. Rather than trying to appeal to every potential client in Austin's competitive market, we would target companies that valued strategic thinking and were willing to invest in innovative approaches to their challenges. The new messaging emphasized Momentum Digital's role as thought partners rather than service providers. The website redesign featured case studies that walked visitors through the thinking behind each solution, demonstrating the intellectual rigor that informed their technical execution. "We don't just build digital solutions," became their tagline. "We architect digital transformations." The rebrand launched in March, coinciding with several major Austin tech events where Momentum Digital could test their new positioning with potential clients and industry peers. The response exceeded our most optimistic projections, generating more qualified leads in 2 months than they'd received in the previous 6. "The inquiries we're getting are completely different," Ethan reported during our weekly strategy meeting. "Instead of people asking about hourly rates for specific tasks, we're getting calls from CEOs who want to discuss strategic challenges." My success with the rebrand had earned me credibility within the company and autonomy to pursue additional growth initiatives. Ethan began including me in high-level business development conversations, seeking my input on everything from hiring decisions to expansion planning. The culture at Momentum Digital felt fundamentally different from any work environment I'd experienced in Portland. Instead of hierarchy-driven decision-making, the company operated more like a collective of specialists who contributed their expertise to shared challenges. My creative strategy background was valued equally with technical and business development skills. "You've been here 3 months and you're already essential," Maria observed during a team lunch at a food truck park near the office. "Ethan's been trying to hire someone for your role for over a year. What made you different?" "Maybe because I wasn't looking for a job," I replied honestly. "I was looking for a platform to build something bigger than what I could create alone." The distinction felt important. My freelance work in Portland had been about proving my individual capabilities and maintaining independence. My work at Momentum Digital was about leveraging collective strengths to tackle challenges that none of us could solve individually. Spring in Austin brought South by Southwest, the festival that had been described as a preview of the city's creative potential. Momentum Digital sponsored several events and hosted a client appreciation party that showcased our new brand positioning to the wider creative community. The festival was everything I'd been promised and more. For 10 days, Austin transformed into a living laboratory where technology, creativity, and entrepreneurship collided in unexpected ways. Momentum Digital's events attracted attention from potential clients, collaborators, and industry leaders who appreciated our strategic approach to digital transformation. "I've never seen networking like this," I told Ethan after a particularly successful panel discussion where he'd spoken about the future of strategic digital partnerships. In Portland, industry events felt like closed circles. Here, it feels like everyone's actively looking for their next collaboration. "That's the Austin advantage," he replied. "People come here to build things, not to protect what they've already built." The observation resonated beyond professional networking. My personal life in Austin was developing along similar lines, focused on creating new connections rather than maintaining old obligations. I joined a rock climbing group that met twice weekly, started taking salsa lessons at a studio in South Austin, and discovered a community of entrepreneurs who gathered monthly to discuss challenges and share resources. The contrast with my Portland social life was striking. In Portland, my friendships had been built around shared history and gradual intimacy. In Austin, relationships developed around shared interests and mutual support for each other's ambitions. Both approaches had value, but the Austin model felt more aligned with my current priorities. One evening in April, while working late on a particularly complex client strategy, I received an unexpected email that would test everything I'd built in my new life. The message was from Victoria Stone, the Portland CEO whose contract I'd lost due to the coffee poisoning incident. Chloe, the email read, "I hope this message finds you well. I've been following your work with Momentum Digital through industry publications, and I'm impressed by your strategic approach to brand development. My company is expanding into Texas markets and we're looking for a creative partner who understands both digital transformation and regional market dynamics. Would you be interested in discussing a potential collaboration?" I stared at the email for several minutes, processing the implications. Victoria Stone was offering me the opportunity to work on the exact type of project I'd pitched to her months earlier, but from a position of strength rather than desperation. The irony was almost overwhelming. More importantly, her outreach validated the strategic decisions I'd made since leaving Portland. The woman who'd once viewed me as an unproven freelancer now saw me as a valuable partner with specialized expertise. The transformation wasn't just professional but perceptual. I forwarded the email to Ethan with a brief explanation of the background. His response came within minutes. "This is exactly the kind of strategic partnership we've been positioning ourselves to attract. If you think it's a good fit, let's pursue it." And Chloe? This proves that leaving Portland was the right decision. The next morning, I called Victoria Stone to discuss the potential collaboration. The conversation was professional but warm, with none of the tentative uncertainty that had characterized our previous interactions. "I have to admit," she said after we'd outlined the basic parameters of the project, "I regret not working with you when we first met. Your approach was exactly what we needed, but I wasn't ready to take that kind of creative risk at the time." "Sometimes timing is everything," I replied diplomatically, though I privately marveled at how different this conversation felt from our initial meeting. The contract Victoria Stone proposed was substantial, involving brand strategy for her company's expansion into 3 Texas markets over 18 months. More significantly, it represented the kind of strategic partnership that would establish Momentum Digital as a serious player in multi-state business development. "This changes our trajectory," Ethan said after I presented the opportunity to our leadership team. "If we execute this successfully, it positions us to compete for similar contracts across the Southwest." The Victoria Stone project became my primary focus through the spring and early summer, requiring extensive research into Texas market dynamics, consumer behavior analysis, and competitive landscape mapping. The work was exactly what I'd hoped to be doing when I'd first pitched to her in Portland, but with resources and support that made excellence achievable rather than aspirational. Working with Victoria Stone also provided perspective on how much I'd grown as a strategic thinker and project manager. The woman who'd struggled to articulate her value proposition to Portland clients now led client calls with confidence, presented research findings with authority, and managed complex project timelines with efficiency that impressed even our most detail-oriented team members. "You're not the same person I hired 6 months ago," Ethan observed during one of our regular one-on-one meetings. "The technical skills were always there, but your executive presence has developed remarkably fast. Maybe because I finally found an environment where I can be my authentic self instead of constantly trying to prove I deserve to be taken seriously." The insight felt profound as I articulated it. In Portland, I'd spent so much energy defending my choices and justifying my ambitions that I'd rarely had the opportunity to simply demonstrate my capabilities. Austin, and specifically Momentum Digital, had provided space for me to show rather than tell what I could contribute. By July, the Victoria Stone project was ahead of schedule and exceeding performance benchmarks. Her company's Texas expansion was generating significant market share gains, and their brand positioning was being studied by competitors as a model for regional growth strategies. "We want to extend the contract for another year," Victoria informed me during our quarterly review call. "But we also want to discuss expanding the scope to include other regional markets." The proposal would triple the size of our engagement and establish Momentum Digital as Victoria Stone's primary strategic partner for all expansion initiatives. It represented exactly the kind of relationship Ethan had envisioned when he'd hired me. More personally, it vindicated every risk I'd taken since leaving Portland. The woman who'd been dismissed by her ex-boyfriend as impractical, poisoned by his new girlfriend out of jealousy, and overlooked by clients who couldn't see her potential, was now leading million-dollar strategic initiatives for industry leaders. August brought another milestone when Momentum Digital was invited to present our regional expansion methodology at a major business development conference in Dallas. The speaking opportunity positioned our company as thought leaders in strategic digital transformation, attracting attention from potential clients across the Southwest. Standing on that conference stage, presenting research and insights to an audience of industry executives, I felt the full weight of my transformation from Portland freelancer to Austin strategic leader. The woman who'd driven to Texas with little more than determination and a laptop was now shaping industry conversations about the future of regional business development. "That was exceptional," Ethan said after our presentation received enthusiastic applause and multiple follow-up requests. "You commanded that room like you'd been doing keynote presentations for years." Maybe because I finally have something worth saying and the platform to say it effectively. The conference generated 12 new business inquiries within 2 weeks, including 3 potential clients whose projects would require expanding our team and capabilities. Success was accelerating our growth in ways that felt sustainable rather than overwhelming. September marked my 8-month anniversary with Momentum Digital, a milestone that prompted reflection on everything that had changed since my arrival in Austin. The nervous newcomer who'd taken a risk on an unknown company was now integral to their strategic direction and growth planning. Ethan scheduled our quarterly review as a dinner meeting at one of Austin's best restaurants, a gesture that felt more like celebrating a partnership than evaluating an employee's performance. "I have something to discuss with you," he said after we'd ordered. "The company's growth trajectory has exceeded our projections, largely because of the strategic direction you've provided. Our investors are interested in expanding our equity compensation program to include key team members." The offer he outlined was generous, providing ownership stake that reflected my contributions to the company's success and future growth potential. More importantly, it represented recognition that I'd become essential to Momentum Digital's identity and direction. "There's also something else," Ethan continued. "I've been invited to speak at a major international conference in London next year about innovative approaches to strategic partnerships. I'd like you to co-present with me, representing our collaborative methodology." London. International recognition. Co-presenting with someone whose opinion I'd grown to respect deeply. The opportunities felt almost surreal compared to the limited horizons I'd faced in Portland just 1 year earlier. "I'm interested in both offers," I replied, trying to maintain professional composure despite my excitement. "But I want to make sure we're building something sustainable, not just capitalizing on short-term success." "That's exactly why these opportunities make sense," Ethan assured me. "You think strategically about long-term growth, not just immediate wins. That perspective is what's driven our success, and it's what will sustain it." Driving home through Austin's warm September evening, I marveled at the unpredictability of life's trajectory. 12 months ago, I'd been devastated by betrayal, questioning my judgment, and struggling to maintain confidence in my professional abilities. Now I was preparing to co-present at international conferences and hold equity stake in a company whose growth I'd helped architect. The transformation hadn't happened overnight or through luck. It had required courage to leave familiar surroundings, wisdom to recognize opportunities disguised as risks, and persistence to prove my value in a competitive market. Most importantly, it had required learning to see myself as others saw me when I was performing at my highest level rather than defending against others' lowest expectations. Austin had given me the platform to discover what I was capable of building when I had access to resources, support, and collaborators who shared my ambitions. The woman who'd been dismissed as unrealistic by her ex-boyfriend was now helping shape the future of strategic business development across multiple markets. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight I felt the deep satisfaction of someone who'd fought for her dreams and won. The email arrived on a Thursday morning in October, buried among dozens of conference follow-ups and client inquiries. The sender's name stopped me cold, Tyler Brooks, writing from his Meridian Consulting email address with a subject line that read, "Professional Inquiry, Austin Market Expansion." I opened the message with curiosity rather than dread, surprised by how little emotional reaction his name provoked after months of building my new life in Austin. "Chloe, I hope this message finds you well. Meridian Consulting is exploring expansion opportunities in the Austin market, and your name came up during our research into local strategic partners. Would you be available for a brief call to discuss potential collaboration opportunities? Best regards, Tyler Brooks, Business Development Director." The professional tone was carefully neutral, but I recognized Tyler's tendency to reach out when he needed something while maintaining plausible deniability about his motivations. A quick internet search revealed that Meridian Consulting had indeed been struggling with client retention issues, likely prompting their interest in new markets and partnerships. I forwarded the email to Ethan with a brief explanation of my history with the sender. His response was immediate and supportive. "Your call entirely, but if you're interested in taking the meeting, I'd like to sit in. Could be an interesting opportunity to evaluate potential Portland connections." The idea of Tyler discovering my current success held a certain poetic appeal, but I found myself less interested in his reaction than in the strategic possibilities his inquiry represented. Momentum Digital had been discussing Pacific Northwest expansion, and established connections in Portland could accelerate those plans significantly. I replied to Tyler's email with professional courtesy, suggesting a video conference the following week and indicating that my business partner would join the discussion. The phrasing was intentionally vague about my role and relationship with Ethan, allowing Tyler to form his own assumptions. The scheduled call took place on a Tuesday afternoon, with Tyler appearing on screen from what looked like a generic conference room. His appearance was polished but slightly strained, suggesting the kind of professional pressure I remembered from his more stressful periods during our relationship. "Chloe, it's good to see you," he said with practiced warmth that felt hollow through the video connection. "I have to admit, I was surprised to learn you'd relocated to Austin. The creative scene there must be quite different from Portland." "Different but aligned with my goals," I replied evenly. "Tyler, this is Ethan Walsh, my business partner and co-founder of Momentum Digital." Ethan, Tyler, and I knew each other in Portland before my relocation. I watched Tyler's expression shift as he processed the introduction, clearly recalibrating his assumptions about my current situation. The woman he'd dismissed as impractical was apparently co-founding companies and speaking as an equal with someone whose professional credentials he could research and verify. "Pleasure to meet you," Ethan said smoothly. "Chloe's strategic insights have been instrumental in our growth trajectory. She's developed some innovative approaches to market expansion that might be relevant to your Portland operations." The conversation proceeded with professional efficiency as Tyler outlined Meridian's challenges and growth objectives. Their client base was stagnating, their service offerings felt outdated compared to emerging competitors, and their leadership team recognized the need for strategic transformation but lacked internal expertise to execute it effectively. "We're particularly interested in Austin because of the strategic innovation happening there," Tyler explained, his tone becoming more earnest as he described their difficulties. "Companies like yours seem to be developing approaches that we haven't seen in more traditional markets. Strategic innovation requires cultural transformation, not just tactical changes," I replied, drawing on insights I developed through months of client work and industry observation. "Most companies want the results of innovative thinking without investing in the mindset shifts that make innovation sustainable." Tyler nodded thoughtfully, clearly recognizing value in perspectives he was hearing for the first time. "That's exactly the kind of thinking we need access to. Would Momentum Digital be interested in consulting on our transformation process?" Ethan and I exchanged glances, communicating through the silent understanding we developed during months of collaborative decision-making. The opportunity was legitimate and potentially valuable, but it would require careful boundary management given my personal history with Tyler. "We'd be open to exploring a consulting relationship," Ethan replied diplomatically. "Our approach involves comprehensive assessment before proposing solutions, which would include stakeholder interviews and organizational analysis. The process is thorough but necessary for sustainable transformation." "What would that timeline look like?" Tyler asked, leaning forward with obvious interest. "Initial assessment would take approximately 6 weeks, followed by strategy development and implementation planning," I explained, falling naturally into the consultative rhythm I'd mastered through dozens of similar conversations. The full engagement typically spans 12 to 18 months, depending on the scope of transformation required. Tyler's eyes widened slightly at the timeline and implied investment level, but his interest remained evident. "Could you send me a proposal outline? I'd like to present this to our executive team as soon as possible." After the call ended, Ethan and I debriefed with the analytical approach we applied to all potential client relationships. "Legitimate opportunity with some personal complexity for you," he summarized. "The question is whether the business value justifies the emotional energy of working with your ex-boyfriend." "Honestly, I don't think there would be much emotional energy involved," I replied, surprising myself with the truth of that statement. Watching him struggle to understand concepts I'd been developing for months was more educational than triggering. He's not the same person I remember, and I'm definitely not who I was when we were together. The proposal I developed over the following days was comprehensive and strategically sound, reflecting everything I'd learned about organizational transformation through my work with diverse clients. More importantly, it positioned Momentum Digital as the expert partner capable of solving problems that Meridian couldn't address internally. Tyler's response came within 48 hours, accepting our proposed scope and timeline without negotiation. The eagerness suggested desperation beneath Meridian's professional facade, confirming that their challenges were more serious than Tyler had initially admitted. The first phase of our engagement required a site visit to Portland for stakeholder interviews and organizational assessment. Flying back to my former city after 10 months in Austin felt like visiting a foreign country where I'd once lived, familiar but fundamentally changed by my own transformation. Tyler met us at Meridian's offices, introducing Ethan and me to his colleagues with obvious pride in securing our services. The dynamic was fascinating to observe. He clearly wanted to impress us with his professional environment while simultaneously seeking validation that hiring us was a smart decision. The interviews I conducted revealed organizational problems that extended far beyond tactical challenges. Meridian's leadership team operated with hierarchical thinking that stifled innovation, their client relationships were transactional rather than strategic, and their company culture prioritized conventional approaches over creative problem solving. "Your assessment is quite comprehensive," Tyler commented during our wrap-up meeting. "Some of these insights are honestly painful to hear, but they explain a lot about our recent struggles." "Organizational transformation always involves confronting uncomfortable truths," I replied professionally. "The question is whether leadership is committed to making the changes necessary for sustainable improvement." 3 days later, we flew back to Austin with a clear understanding of Meridian's situation and a detailed plan for their transformation process. The work would be challenging but achievable, assuming their leadership team remained committed to meaningful change rather than cosmetic improvements. "How does it feel?" Ethan asked as our plane lifted off from Portland's airport. "Coming back as the expert they're hiring to solve problems they can't handle themselves?" "Satisfying, but not in the way I expected," I answered thoughtfully. I thought seeing Tyler's professional struggles would feel like vindication. Instead, it feels like confirmation that leaving was the right choice for both of us. The Meridian engagement proved successful over the following months, transforming their organizational culture and strategic approach in ways that generated measurable improvements in client satisfaction and business development. Tyler proved surprisingly receptive to feedback and willing to implement changes that challenged his traditional thinking patterns. More importantly, the project established Momentum Digital's reputation in Pacific Northwest markets, leading to additional opportunities with companies seeking similar transformational consulting. Our innovative approaches to organizational change attracted attention from industry publications and conference organizers, further cementing our position as thought leaders in strategic business development. During our final presentation to Meridian's executive team, Tyler approached me privately to express gratitude that felt genuine rather than performative. "I owe you an apology for how things ended between us," he said simply. "Not just the relationship, but my failure to recognize what you were capable of achieving. Watching you work over these months has been illuminating in ways I'm still processing." "We both learned from that experience," I replied diplomatically. "Sometimes relationships end because people need different things to become who they're meant to be." Flying back to Austin that evening, I reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought me full circle with Tyler while revealing how completely my life had transformed. The woman who'd been devastated by his betrayal now sat in first-class seating paid for by consulting fees from his company, traveling back to a city where she was building something significant with someone who valued her contributions. The coffee shop poisoning incident that had once felt like the worst thing that could happen had actually been the catalyst for discovering strength and ambition I hadn't known I possessed. Brooke's attempts to sabotage my health had inadvertently launched my transformation into someone whose success no longer depended on anyone else's approval or support. Austin's skyline appeared through the airplane window as we approached landing, a visual reminder of the city that had given me space to discover who I could become when I stopped trying to prove myself to people who couldn't see my value. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight I felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd faced her past and emerged more confident in her future. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.